Voices heard. Over the years, over the last 8 to 10 years, we've seen a growing number of female techpreneurs, as we like to call them, who are making not just their mark, but they're a name for themselves in the industry. And we're seeing that it's not just tech, but they're focusing on different aspects of tech. There's agri-tech, there's health tech. And we're so excited about this, which is why as a bank, it made sense to us to support this, but not just support it for the sake of it, but sustainably so. Since 2019, we've successfully supported well over 55 women directly, but thousands through the sessions we've had in partnership with the Enterprise Development Center.
Personally, I believe this is one very detailed accelerator program I've been on. They're focused on you as an individual, they're focused on your business. It's been very enlightening from the first day to the last session.
It's been an inspiring moment here as the 2025 Women in Tech Graduation and Awards Ceremony, a space where ideas, innovation, and impact continues to unfold. As these women take a step forward to make a solution today and tomorrow, we are rest assured that the future ecosystem of Nigeria in tech is going to make a big difference and certainly become brighter. I'm Praise Peters, reporting for Voice of the People Television.
Are you ready for the extraordinary? Something big is happening on your screen. Introducing VOP TV. Now streaming on SLTV channel 264. From breaking news to captivating conversations, news analysis, giving you all sides to the story. We bring in-depth discussions on the issues that matter, from politics to sports, entertainment, and lifestyle. VOP TV on SLTV channel 264. Join us as we redefine what television means to you. Voice of the People Television, VOP TV. Now you have more than a voice. VOP TV. Now you have more than a voice.
That's 2564 is coming up on Barney 9, right?
The 2564 Atlantic Tower.
What happens in the hush behind hangar doors? Who signs the papers that gamble with lives? Which truths were grounded before they even ever had wings? If you've ever buckled a seatbelt at 30,000 feet, if you've ever stared out of that tiny window and wondered who's really in control of the skies, it isn't just flight, it's power, it's politics, it's pressure sealed in steel. We're peeling back the clouds from runway risks to sky-high secrets. We're diving deep where most dare not to look. Aviation Scope, every Sunday at 7 p.m. only on Voice of the People TV. We don't just report, we reveal. We don't just ask, we uncover. Because when it comes to the skies, ignorance is turbulence. Aviation Scope, the sky isn't the limit, it's just the beginning.
Join us as we drive into the world of politics through insightful interviews with prominent political figures, both serving and former governors, ministers, senators, legislators, party chieftains, activists, and analysts. Get first-hand information into the decision-making processes that affect our daily lives. Highly engaging one-hour program that brings political discourse into focus.
I am Chukwuma Okoro.
Political Lens, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. Join us.
This is African News on Voice of the People Television, where we don't just bring you the news, we bring you Africa's heartbeats, the policies that shapes our world, and the economy that determines our future. African News on Voice of the People Television. Stay with us.
The red carpets, awards, the razzmatazz, music, fashion, interviews, and more. Spotlight on Voice of the People Television. Let's feed you with all the juicy stories in the global entertainment space, bringing you the glitz and glamour as they hot. Stay tuned to Spotlight, 1 p.m. Monday to Friday. Spotlight on VOP TV. Entertainment like never before.
Are you ready for the extraordinary? Something big is happening on your screen. Introducing VOP TV. Now streaming on SLTV channel 264. From breaking news to captivating conversations, news analysis, giving you all sides to the story. We break in-depth discussions on the issues that matter, from politics to sports, entertainment, and lifestyle. VOP TV on SLTV channel 264. Join us as we redefine what television means to you. Voice of the People Television, VOP TV. Now you have more than a voice. VOP TV. Now you have more than a voice.
African News on Voice of the People Television, where we don't just bring you the news, we bring you Africa's heartbeats, the policies that shapes our world, and the economy that determines our future. African News on Voice of the People Television. Stay with us.
Voice of the People, you can hear me now. My name is Patrick Doyle, and I wish that you continue to echo the voices of the people. Big up VOP TV.
My name is Su Ibifa Dokubo. Please.
Well, hello and welcome to the African News on Voice of the People Television. I am David Edwin. Before we begin the news, we would urge you to kindly visit our website, www.vop.ng, for fresh and trending news stories. We'll begin the African news from the story where the rebel movement, that's the M23 rebel, has announced its exit from the strategically important city of Uvira in eastern DRC. This reportedly comes at the request of American mediators in the conflict between the M23 rebels and the armed forces of the DR Congo. The rebel movement announced on Wednesday that it had agreed to a request from the U.S. mediators a day earlier to withdraw its forces from the city of Uvira in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The M23 rebels has been fighting Congolese armed forces in the region for the past year in what has been widely described as a brutal conflict that has killed and displaced hundreds of thousands of civilians. Despite the leaders of the DRC and Rwanda accused of backing the M23, signing a U.S. brokered peace agreement in Washington on December the 4th, the M23 rebels were not included in the negotiations. As a result, they captured Uvira, which is situated near the borders with Burundi and Rwanda, just days after the peace deal. The M23 rebels said that its withdrawal was happening for the sake of peace, and reports confirmed that their troops began leaving the town voluntarily, with the withdrawal reportedly set to be completed on Thursday. Moving on, casualties were reported early Thursday after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, carried out intensive drone airstrikes on the northern Sudanese city of Atbatra. targeting key electricity infrastructure and other sites, according to local media. The Sudanese outlet Sudan News reported that RSF forces struck a power substation in Atbara, the capital of River Nile State, causing electricity outages across River Nile State and parts of a neighboring Red Sea, citing local sources. Monitoring platforms in River Nile State said the attack also targeted the Al Makwan power station with a swarm of drones. The report did include Sudanese air defense intercepted several of the unmanned aircraft, while other trucks in Atbara facility sparkling a limited fire and triggering widespread power cuts that affected the River Nile. The report also said two civil defense workers stationed at the Atbara power facility were killed in the attack, and several main transformers sustained severe damages. Moving on, over 1,000 civilians were killed when a Sudanese paramilitary group took over a famine-stricken displacement camp in Sudan's Darfur in April, including about a third who were summarily executed, according to a report by the UN Human Rights Office on Thursday. For months before the April 11th to 13th assault, the Rapid Support Forces blocked entry to food and supplies to the Zamzam camp in Sudan's western region of Darfur, housing nearly 500,000 people displaced by civil war, according to the UN report. During the takeover, the RSF directed attacks against civilians, according to the UN report, and survivors reported widespread killing, rape, torture, and abduction, with at least 319 persons executed in the camp as they tried to flee. Moving on to other stories, and this is coming from Burkina Faso, where Wednesday they released 11 personnel of the Nigerian Air Force who were being detained on December the 8th after their aircraft made a precautionary landing in Bobo Dioulasso due to a technical issue. Nigeria's Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuga disclosed this in a statement, saying that the release of the detained crew and aircraft were released after what he called sustained dialogue with Burkina Faso's military regime leader Ibrahim Traore. Traore released the personnel after meeting with a Nigerian delegation led by Tuga. This was according to the statement. The personnel included 2 crew members, flight crew members, and 9 passengers. Moving on to drill rappers from Liverpool who were seen carrying guns and parading with troops in Somalia during a cross-border clan conflict could be questioned by police upon their return to the UK. 31-year-old Abdi Fattah Gulaid and 40-year-old Noah Ihekwe, both British citizens, traveled to the northeast of the African country earlier this year. The pair, both from the Torquay area of Liverpool, produced music under the names Steel Brinking and Razor. In a footage obtained by newsman, Gulaid can be heard telling armed troops the time for talk is finished. The extent of the man's involvement with the troops is not known, but the UK government told reporters that any person who travels from the UK to conflict zones to engage in unlawful activities should expect to be investigated upon their return. Gulaid is affiliated to the Wasangeli clan, which has been embroiled in tension and fighting with the rival Isaac clan. Around 2,500 Tunisians marched through the coastal city of Gabes on Wednesday, reviving protests over pollution from a state-owned phosphate complex amid rising anger over perceived failures of protect public health. People chanted mainly Gabes wants to leave on the 15th anniversary of the start of the 2011 pro-democracy uprising that sparked the Arab Spring movement against autocracy. The protests added to the pressure on President Kais Saied's government, which is grappling with a deep financial crisis and growing street unrest, protests by journalists, banks, and public transport systems. The powerful UGTT union has called for a nationwide strike next month, signaling great tension in the country. The recent protests are widely seen as one of the biggest challenges facing Saied since he began ruling by decree in 2011. Well, you're still watching the African News right here on Voice of the People Television. We'll go straight to the analysis segment of the news. And joining us now to make sense of the stories and more in the studio with us is Mr. Dele Fanimo. Mr. Fanimo is a seasoned reporter right here in Nigeria and also a political and public affairs analyst and commentator. Mr. Fanimo, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, David.
All right, then let's start off this conversation clearly from this news coming from Tunisia, where interestingly, Tunisians are protesting in Gabes over pollution from state chemical plants. Now, this interestingly saw about 2,500 Tunisians take to the streets, particularly on the coastal city of Gabes, clearly talking about the pollution of the state-owned phosphate complex, of course, rising anger as perceived failures by the government to protecting public health in that area. What's your position with the fact that Tunisians are not just being aggrieved about the situation of these particular chemical plants, but interestingly about the fact that the country itself is going through a session of financial meltdown?
You see, let me start by saying that it is the inalienable right of citizens to protest.
Right.
The limit to that is you don't make it a violent protest.
Okay.
And I'm glad that the report has not indicated any iota of violence, given the fact that Tunisia is still embroiled in crisis, aftermath of the Arab Spring, which has also affected the Sahel belt that is also assailing Nigeria till today. So another crisis in Tunisia may exacerbate what is happening in the continent.
Okay.
So I would admonish them to make sure that it doesn't escalate beyond what it is now. Now, secondly, I am curious about the way government runs its people. The fact that you don't get immediate attack from these chemicals, harmful chemicals, does not mean that it doesn't have debilitating effect at the long run. You see, effluent from factories, depending on the kind of chemical,
right,
could take a while, sometimes 10 years, 15 years, before it begins to manifest. It's like you have a company that releases hot lead into the air. Those who inhale this hot lead are not going to be affected in 1 year, 2 years.
It takes a bit of time.
It takes a long time. So, but it is good that these Tunisians had been schooled enough to know the effect of this chemical that is being released to the atmosphere.
Okay.
And it's the minimal request citizens can make of a responsible and responsive government that, look, these chemicals are harmful and we want you to mitigate it. And part of the mitigation is to make sure that this, as development gets to a particular point, you evacuate this factory and move it to far places.
Now, I like the fact that you just mentioned the part of moving these factories. Interestingly, in October 2025, this same year, residents around the Gabes coastal city clearly went to the plant demanding that they have a major closure. And again, that didn't go down well with the owners of the plant, which they called for security attention. And then police fired tear gas at residents who were practically trying to ask for their own safety. Now, if that move was made in October, and here we are in December, the people are still going to having these demonstrations for government to even see clearer. Isn't that a clear indication that the government of President Kais Saied is not listening to the people? Or is there another way to helping the residents of this area and these plants and air pollution getting to the barest of minimum?
You see, if governments will not make consensus and a peaceful resolution possible, what the government is asking for is violence to make it possible. But I hope it won't get to that point, because Tunisia, as we speak, is still volatile, and there are thousands of illicit arms in the hands of non-state actors. So an uprising in that place may snowball into another round of mayhem that could even spill over to other contiguous nations.
Now, I like the fact that you're actually speaking my mind here, because the government of the presidency, Saied, did say that one of the constraints they had for not clearly shutting down that particular plant is the fact that they are a critical exporter of phosphates, and that on one hand is giving the country foreign funding.
Exchange.
So if they, because of what they call over-regulating, these people decide to want to close down, that also would affect a country that's already financially strained. On the part of the presidency, do you think he's actually considering the funding coming in as against the lives that will be lost by the consistent operations of these plants in that area?
You see, the first thing you ask yourself is, anywhere in the world, the two major planks on which a government is rested is welfare of the people and preservation of lives
and
property.
Right.
When you place these options side by side, if you insist and you impose this company on Tunisians, and at later year they start manifesting the consequence of unrestricted contact with these harmful chemicals, are you not going to spend much more than what you think you are saving now?
So on the part of government, they are not doing well with this level of their decision of keeping quiet?
No, they need to act and act fast, because the multiplier effect is like you are digging a hole to cover another one.
I like that line, multiplier effect. Mr. Fanimo, help Africans understand this. What is the vast implication of having such a major plant in residential area like we are seeing right now in Tunisia?
You recall there was a time that
and this is not about Tunisia alone, because some part of Africa, including Lagos, is having such a plant.
You recall that in some part of the north, there was this outbreak of a strange disease, which was linked to effluence from lead in some part of that environment. For lead to act in your body system, it takes a minimum of 10 years. That's why it's not something that you should allow within the vicinity of a built-up community where people reside. Because it's going to affect their water. If you dig a well, it will seep into that well and people will consume it. Then you will now begin to see birth deformity, infants having lungs problem, and vital organs are malformed. Now, imagine how much will be spent by government at that point compared to shutting down this factory to make people live. If there are no Tunisians,
yes,
Tunisia will not exist.
And the government will not even have who to
and when the government and when the people of Tunisia are not there, who becomes the government? Is it not the government is a product of the communities? Well, so if you are saying because you feel that money will come, then
at the part of foreign direct investment.
Yes, and then you make $10 billion. When the crisis comes, you may end up paying $50 million, and the crisis will not leave.
Mr. Fanimo, let's talk about that.
So it's like putting the cart before the horse.
Unfortunately, really. Let's talk about the approach that the government have been taking thus far. I did make mention earlier of the protest by residents in October. And of course, that also is laced with another protest from journalists to transport workers, and of course, Gabes residents clearly on this same table. The approach at which the government is using, which of course is that of the security operatives, firing tear gas and all of that. If this is used in this situation, what should we then say is the total body language of the government as concerning the exact situation that these people are talking about, rather than dealing with that situation, but dealing with something else?
Well, you see, this is just a clear case of misplaced priority. You understand? And you look at the weight of a problem. Those days when we were in secondary school, we were taught in economics opportunity costs.
Right.
You need to factor, and you know, the major problem in Africa is we hardly take data seriously. We see it as just figures. We hardly interpret data.
And this is a continent to know
the consequence.
Grow.
Yes, because if you just pick data as figures, you're not likely to understand the import of that data. But if you allow data to wear human face, that's when you know the immediate, the short term, mid-term, and long-term implication of that data you are holding in your hands that represent just figures. And that is where opportunity cost comes in, as taught by our economics teacher in secondary school. Then that's where you now prioritize. Okay, I'm going to make so much money, but who am I making this money for? Who is the owner of this money? These are people that are dying as a result of allowing this company to make more money for the country. And then who do you are? At the end of the day, you are talking about education.
Right.
You are talking about health. The dead don't enjoy health.
Is there
the dead don't enjoy
Is there
education.
a long-term implementation, or well, let me use the word implementation, that the government is trying to run away from by not wanting to relocate this plant, this chemical plant, to another location rather than still keep them around residents of Gabes? Is there a long-term implementation plan that they are running away from?
Do you know funny thing about this? I have witnessed it in Nigeria. I've witnessed it in Ibadan.
Okay.
The proximity of gates, Agodi Gate,
right,
to the prison is such that if you come into that market, if you are not very conversant, there is no line of demarcation between the prison yard and the market. Now, at some point, there were a series of jailbreaks. And you know, in that situation, once an inmate mingles with the market people, it is very difficult to identify, except the emancipated one. Now, government now decided, okay, now let's move the market to a new location. Do you know those who kicked? Not the traders in the market, not the artisans in the market. It is the local government chairman that kicked. And what was his reason? Revenue collection.
Oh boy.
You cannot imagine, considering the revenue it will lose to another local government at the expense of, because anytime there's a jailbreak, there will always be bedlam and people are killed.
Right.
Now, it's not looking at the people that will be killed anytime there's a jailbreak. It doesn't want to see why that market would even expand the city. Because once that market is moved to the outskirts, people will follow the market, build new edifices, and then sector will thrive, real estate will thrive, commercial activities will thrive.
There's a part of not looking at the broader picture.
That is what I'm saying. So you will be surprised that it could be that, in this case in Tunisia, maybe the province where this factory is located might be considering loss of revenue. Okay. Because anywhere that factory is located in Tunisia, the national government can still benefit. And the revenue we're talking about can still be collected. But because the provincial head will say, if it goes from A, which is my province, to another province, it's more money to the other province and less money for me.
Oh, well, we hope that the government of Tunisia do right by her people and get this particular plant to another location, because here's the thing, life and properties is the primary objective of every sitting government. Let's jump to another story, Mr. Fadimo. Interestingly, a bit of good news coming on the part of the Nigerian Air Force, where the detained personnel in Burkina Faso have been released after a conversation with the Foreign Affairs Minister, I'm talking about Yusuf Tuga, and of course the military junta leader in Burkina Faso, the person of Ibrahim Traore. What's your position with this particular story as being updated just yesterday, Mr. Fadimo?
You see, it's scary to hear this news, because I can imagine the kind of trauma this 11-member personnel from the armed forces would have been facing in the last 10 days or 9 since they were released yesterday.
Yes.
You know, they were arrested and detained since November 8th or thereabouts. I mean, December 8th, you know. So the trauma is enough that they need to have therapists work on them by the time they return back to Nigeria.
Okay.
And you see, this is where diplomacy takes center stage rather than brute force. Some Nigerians were saying, what is the strength of Burkina Faso militarily? What is the strength of Burkina Faso? Why can't Nigeria go and overrun Burkina Faso? It doesn't happen that way. You must have exhausted all diplomatics, all diplomatic shuttles, all diplomatic engagement before you talk of confrontation, you know. And I'm happy that the military junta in Burkina Faso is also amenable to negotiation,
right,
and we are glad that these guys are back.
Well, again,
actually they are back.
Concerns also have been raised about the fact that across the Sahelian states now, there is the concern about the fact that Nigeria is being seen as a potential invasion force as a result of this move, even though, yes, we are not so clear on the conversation between the Foreign Affairs Minister and Ibrahim Traore, the junta leader. But from your perspective, Mr. Fanimo, is there a possibility that this unfriendly act, according to what the Air Force of Burkina Faso called it, is seen as a potential threat to other sovereign states across Africa?
You see, the military junta in Burkina Faso has not told us a story of invasion. The government has not told us that those guys were on espionage. They have not told us that they breached military and security rules. The narrative out there is that they first landed as a result of some technical issues. And nobody has told us the final destination of these aircrafts, you know. So a lot of things are shrouded in mystery, so that it makes it almost impossible for you to have a clear understanding of
what exactly is going on.
What exactly is going on, for us to be able to properly situate. But I think the overarching story here is that after 10 days of detention, they were finally released to the Nigerian government through the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is a career diplomat. That should be underscored.
Right.
It's not for the lily-livered.
Okay. Well, again, like you did say, it's a plus on the part of the Foreign Affairs Minister who did have that conversation with the junta leader. But let's move to another conversation. There was a report by the UN that did say over 1,000 civilians were killed in Sudan. And I'm talking about the Darfur region of Sudan, just in April. Mr. Fanimo, Sudan's situation has been termed the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And if 1,000 persons were killed, civilians to be precise, in the month of April alone this year, how much of an impact would the consistent fighting of the warring factors in Sudan have on not just the economy, but the people, should the fighting stop today?
Who wants war? Nobody.
Because it's still going to end one of these days.
You know, who wants war? Nobody. But unfortunately, you can't make an omelette without breaking egg. And for every war, there will always be casualties.
Right.
And that's why some leaders across the world would rather preach peace rather than encourage people to go to war. And in this case, Sudan and Southern Sudan had been embroiled in bitter feuds, bitter war. And in the aftermath of this war, definitely there will be casualties. But the only thing that is plausible here that we should pursue is peace. Let there be peace. And honestly, sometimes when I look at Africa as a whole, I feel uncomfortable because where in Africa, in all the sub-regions, can you safely say there is no crisis? Go to Central America, Central Africa, you have it. Come to West Africa, you have it. East Africa has its own share. Southern Africa has its own share across this sub-region. And I don't know what AU is doing. AU should...
I like that you mentioned AU, Mr. Fanimo. This is a major concern.
Should be concerned about all this. Then why are they there? Why is my country giving them grants? Is it not to pursue peace and harmony? But we're not seeing this.
Before I let you go, Mr. Fanimo, how much of institutional decay have we uncovered with not just AU, even ECOWAS, even the Southern African Development Commission, that's SADC, and even the Eastern African Development? How much of institutional decay are we seeing within these institutions that are supposed to be holding forth?
The unfortunate thing is these institutions largely remain advisory. It's like a dog that can bark but cannot bite.
But they can issue sanctions.
Sanctions that will be obeyed in breach without that bite. You know how many cases that have been taken to ECOWAS court?
Should this be attributed to not having strong men in Africa again? Strong political leaders in Africa, like the Kwame Nkrumah of this world, the Nyereres of this world. Should we attribute not having these kind of men to the decay of the institutions in Africa?
You see, what is the centerpiece of some of these countries' policy, foreign policy? You need to examine that. And how much of convergence do we have in some of these sub-regional bodies, which automatically is still answerable to the regional body, which is AU. And for instance, I expect that, crisis or no crisis, these sub-regional bodies should have standing army. If ECOWAS, for instance, had standing army, it won't be the lot of Nigeria alone going to quell the coup in the Republic of Benin.
Well, again, some would say this army that you joint tax army that you're talking about will be funded by these countries, and some are struggling financially with the economy.
There is no country that does not suffer.
All right, then.
Even America suffers.
Okay, well, because of our time, really, this is where we have to draw anchor on the analysis segment of the African News. We've been talking with Mr. Dele Fanimo, a seasoned reporter right here in Nigeria, and also a political and public affairs commentator and analyst. Once again, thank you so very much, Mr. Fanimo.
Always my pleasure.
We'll take a very short break right now. When we return, Egypt to host Russia-Africa Diplomacy Forum. These and more will be given to you on the African News when we return. Please stay with us.
Voice of the people.
Glad to have you back. Now, two more.
Awesome.
Partnership Forum will be held on December the 19th and 20th in Cairo, Egypt, marking a new stage in structuring the political and economic dialogue between Moscow and African countries. The announcement was made following a telephone conversation between Egyptian Foreign Affairs Minister Abdel Badr Abdelatif and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, with focus on prospects for bilateral and multilateral cooperation. The meeting will bring together the foreign ministers of Russia and African states, as well as representatives of African Regional Integration Organization. The summit falls within the institutional framework of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, launched to structure political, economic, and sectoral selections between the two parties. Among the key items on the agenda is a follow-up to the forum's action plan for the period of 2023-2026. Reports say discussions will focus on the next step to deepen strategic partnership, with a particular emphasis on developing trade, strengthening economic cooperation, and promoting investment. The Cairo conference is also presented as a key step in preparing for the third Russia-Africa Summit scheduled for 2026. Moving on, a Kenyan environmentalist who sued to stop the opening of a new Ritz-Carlton Safari Lodge that he said blocked a wind-based migration corridor in the Masai Mara Reserve has appealed to withdraw the case. His lawyers have said no explanation for the withdrawal was provided in the notice. Activist Tamer Olol Dapash from the Institute of Maasai Education, Research and Conservation, MERC, filed a lawsuit against Ritz-Carlton, its owner Marriott, the project's local developer Lazizi Mara Limited, and Kenyan authorities in August to try to block the scheduled opening of the lodge. In his petition, he said the luxury 20-suite camp, which includes plunge pools and provides a personalized butler service, obstructs a crucial migration corridor between Masai Mara and Tanzania's Serengeti. Researchers say migration allows wild beasts to find food and maintain genetic diversity among herds. Elsewhere, police in Sinagongwe, southern district of Zambia, have intercepted movement of livestock animals with no stock movement permit from veterinary department and clearance. According to Southern Province Commanding Officer Mono Namanlogo, a truck loaded with coal and goats was intercepted at Sinazizi Mount, Meru Fueling Station after a tip-off from an informer. Reports say the Sino truck belonging to Trustworth Company was driven by Mil Foster Mwale, age 40, accompanied by his wife Vanessa Chitiku, also aged 40. Investigations revealed that the duo jointly bought the animals from the Mulungwa area in Sinagongwe. They reportedly admitted that the animals did not have stock movement permits, and a letter from the village headman where the animals were brought in the senior Mwemba chiefdom area. The couple have since been detained by the police for the offense of restriction to movement of livestock contrary to Section 16(1) and 2 of Zambia's Animal Health Act number 27 of 2010. Moving on to other stories, Gabon is planning to introduce a new housing tax in January to finance the Central African oil-producing country's need as its debts continue to rise. The country is facing an acute squeeze of liquidity that has left it increasingly reliant on regional capital markets. Authorities are working on a tax that will be paid monthly by an owner of a dwelling or a tenant. Special Advisor Maria Noler Ada Mayo said on the Gabon presidency social media. Gabon's treasury will use the fund to improve public lighting, road maintenance, and city cleanliness, according to the statement. The contribution will vary depending on the area, between $1,000 amounting to $1.80 and 30,000 CFA francs amounting to about $53.88 per month. However, the most valuable households with schools and places of worship will be exempted, according to the statement. Moving on, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation has signed a $553 million loan with a consortium of firms for the refurbishment of an Angolan railway line, which forms part of the Lobito Critical Mineral Transport Corridor. The high-profile U.S.-backed Lobito Corridor, which will connect copper and cobalt mines to the Atlantic coast, is part of Washington's global push to secure access to strategic metals and its efforts to counter Chinese influence in Africa. Under the deal signed at a ceremony in Washington, the DFC will provide financing to the Lobito Atlantic Railway, a consortium of Portugal's Mota Egil commodity trading firm Trafigura and rail firm Virtus SA. Zambia has reversed plans to double its gold loyalty rates to 10%. A new 2026 budget bill showed on Wednesday following protests by miners and industry groups. A royalty rate of 5% would continue to apply for gold prices between $1,200 and $5,000 per ounce, according to the revised budget bill, which was approved by Zimbabwe's lower parliament following lengthy debates. In his budget speech last month, Finance Minister Ntuli Nkube had proposed doubling the gold royalty rate by 10% for gold sold above $2,501 an ounce. During the late night budget debate, however, he told lawmakers that a 10% royalty rate would now only apply if the bullion price topped $5,000 an ounce. And from that story, we'll move straight to talking African business. The South African rand was steady in early trade on Thursday as investors await producer inflation data for clues on the health of Africa's most industrialized economy. At around 6:49 hours GMT, the rand traded at 16.7675 against the dollar, little change from its previous close of 16.7750. Traders will keep tabs on the November domestic producer inflation figures due to 9:30 hours GMT, which will provide insights into price pressures in Africa's biggest economy. Economists expect year-on-year producer inflation to fall to 2.8% from 2.9% in October, in line with Nedbank's prediction. Still talking business, Uganda plans to cut its domestic debt issuance by 21.1% in the financial year starting July from the previous period to help trim its ballooning public debts. The Finance Ministry has said this in the budget paper made available to newsmen on Thursday. A total of 9 trillion shillings, amounting to about $2.53 billion worth of treasury bills and bonds, will be issued in the 2026-2027 financial year, compared to 11.4 trillion shillings in the previous year, according to the paper. This reduction reflects government's intention to avoid crowding out of the private sector, curb the rising debt to GDP ratio, and address the growing burden of interest payments relative to revenues, according to the ministry in the paper. Interest payments on Uganda's public debt are projected to swallow nearly a third of all domestic revenues in the 2026-2027 fiscal year, according to the ministry. As a percentage of gross domestic product, public debt rose to 51% in the year June from 46.6% in previous period. And to wrap up the African news, we go straight talking sports. Bafana have arrived Morocco for the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations AFCON as the tournament prepares to offer the highest prize money in its history. The Confederation of African Football (CAF) has confirmed the 2025 AFCON champions will take home $7 million, while runners-up will earn $4 million, with semi-finalists receiving $2.5 million. Still talking sports, the Confederation of African Football (CAF) and Moroccan Agency for Investment and Export Development, AMDI, have concluded an agreement that will see Morocco, now the kingdom's economic brand, become an official sponsor of the CAF African Cup of Nations AFCON Morocco 2025. The agreement was signed by the CAF's president, Patrice Motsepe, and AMDI's Director General, Ali Sedik. Though this partnership, Morocco, would now be associated with the biggest and most unifying sporting event in the African continent, using the CAF AFCON platform to showcase what analysts say is a modern, ambitious, and forward-looking Morocco. Dignitaries at the official signing ceremony in Rabat included the president of Royal Moroccan Football Federation and CAF First Vice President Fawouze Ledjar, CAF General Secretary Veron Mosengo Ombar, amongst others. And with that sports story, we've come to the end of African News right here on Voice of the People Television. Do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel. On YouTube, we're at Voice of the People TV, and on all other social media platforms, we are at VOP TV Live. Thank you so very much for being a part of this broadcast. I am David Edwin. Do have a good afternoon.
VOP TV. Now, you have more than a voice. The red carpets, awards, the razzmatazz, music, fashion, interviews, and more. Spotlight on Voice of the People Television. Let's feed you with all the juicy stories in the global entertainment space, bringing you the glitz and glamour as it is hot. Stay tuned to Spotlight